Up in the air, up for several awards, including several Golden Globes, Best Picture, Best Actor for George Clooney, Best Supporting Actress twice, Anna Kendrick, Vera Farmiga.
You're the critic.
Let's call the whole thing off.
You might have looked it up before you came on.
How am I going to look up how to pronounce the name?
The moviegoerspronunciationguide.com.
Fine. Well, while I'm doing the review, you look up Vera Farmiga
Okay.
on that, and I'll review the film. So the story, this has been described as a very timely satirical comedy to do with the recession. Of course, one should always remember that because of the way that movies work and because of how long it takes to make a movie, if any movie is timely, it's almost certainly by accident. Because when you start making movies, you don't actually know what the economic climate is going to be like by the time they finally get released.
How do you spell hers? Oh, I've got it.
Farmiga. Have you actually got a site called...
Carry on.
Okay, fine. So the story...
I'm still on Images, which is a bit disturbing.
You have to
I better
come
skip
off.
over this bit.
So George Clooney is Ryan Bingham, who's basically, his job is that he spends his life travelling the world on aeroplanes, executive class, being sent to distant locations to fire people. I mean, travelling around America to go and fire people. His job is that he works for a company which essentially handles the business of firing people. Now, this is nominally because the company understands the people management and the complexities involved in this sort of thing. Of course, it's actually because the companies themselves are too chicken to fire their own staff, so they get in George Clooney to fire them. Have you got a result there? You're giving me that look which says I have a result?
No, it's still far. It's certainly farming. I don't know if it's G or J.
Okay, fine. Because
I don't understand phonetics.
No, because you're rubbish. Okay, so anyway, that's what he does. He travels the world firing people, and he's really, really at home with his job. He loves his job. He loves the whole business of the fact that he seems to live in an airport. He loves the fact that he lives out of his suitcase. He loves hotels. He loves the fact that he's got executive cards. He loves the fact that when he presents his card, they have to say, "Oh, hello, sir, welcome back." And that's what he likes. He likes the fact that his existence is basically without baggage, without responsibility, without people. Then what happens is the company that he works for decides that, in fact, the future is not in sending people out around the world. I mean, he's aiming to rack up 10 million air miles, something that apparently only 7 people have done. Less people have done it. Fewer people have done it than have walked on the moon, and this is what he wants to do. The company suddenly decides that, in fact, sending people off to go and fire these people isn't the best way of doing it. The best way of doing it is that they should do it by an internet link, so that they just sit in front of a screen and fire people by the screen. And there's a new woman who comes in, Anna Kendrick, who says, "This is what we should do, this is the future." George Clooney says, no, that's not the way to do it. It has to take the personal touch. And to prove the point, he is sent out on the road with this young new arrival. So there's the odd couple put together. The guy who is completely sort of at home with this totally alienated world of airport lounges and hotels, and the young and still to some extent slightly naive newcomer who believes that there is a radical new way of firing people. And together they thrash out their differences. Here's a clip.
Never want to get married.
Nope.
Never want kids.
Not a chance.
Ever.
Never. Is that so bizarre?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I just don't see the value in it. All right, sell it to me.
What?
Sell me marriage.
Okay, how about love?
Okay.
Stability, just somebody you can count on.
How many stable marriages do you know?
Somebody to talk to, someone to spend your life with.
I'm surrounded by people to talk to. I doubt that's going to change.
How about just not dying alone?
Starting when I was 12, we moved each one of my grandparents into a nursing facility. My parents went the same way. Make no mistake, we all die alone. Now, those cult members in San Diego with the Kool-Aid and the sneakers, they didn't die alone. I'm just saying there are options.
Now, the stuff that's good about the movie, which, as I said, is up for a number of awards. Firstly, there is a nice depiction of that. Nice, probably the wrong word. A good description of that sort of empty-headed, empty-hearted lifestyle that's done with a degree of panache and flair. I mean, one of the things that the film does at the very beginning is it sort of fetishizes the emptiness. It's all him in corridors, him in hotels, him in airport lounges. You see him packing his suitcase and, living that kind of empty existence. And of course, to some extent, because there's so much time spent in airports, it reminds you of, The Terminal Man, the Steven Spielberg movie, which I actually rather liked, although it was generally not that well regarded. The problem with that is that it can also tip over into being, George Clooney doing the character that he does from Ocean's 11. It's like as if the guy from Ocean's 11 was sent out on the road to do firing people. You can almost imagine that it's kind of snappy and, hey, it's empty, hey, it's vacuous, hey, it's, it's all this, but it's also kind of quite alluring. But it's fine. And for the first 2/3 of it, there is what I liked was a kind of quite satirical, quite dark, quite sort of, mean-spirited, which I quite liked, sense of somebody whose job is essentially a moral vacuum and who likes the fact that they don't have any connection to other people. What happens is he starts having a relationship with this woman played by Vera
Farmiga.
Thank you very much, who says, think of me as you, but with, and then she says something else, which I, but different. Think of me as you,
with smaller hands,
but with smaller hands, obviously, and that I like. Now the problem is that about 2/3 of the way through the movie loses its nerve, or it gains a heart, depending on which way you look at it. And it seems to me that this is a regular problem. If you have a movie that wants to have mainstream appeal, but also, wants to say something that's subversive. It's almost like you can do the subversive bit for the first 2/3 of the movie, and then afterwards you've got to kind of cop out. And what happens in the case of this is, it's, you take the Michael Clayton character, which again, George Clooney is playing George Clooney. I think he's very good at playing George Clooney. And I don't mean to say that George Clooney is morally empty, because he's anything but there is a character, there's a screen persona which he has, which is smart and smiles, and, there's the way that George Clooney looks in those coffee adverts. The one when he's holding the what else. It's that performance. It's not a stretch performance. It certainly owes a lot to Michael Clayton. It certainly owes a lot to Ocean's 11. He could actually walk out of this movie and into either of those movies and do a scene in that character and walk back in again. He'd still be doing the same character, which is fine. That's the character that he does well. But 2/3 of the way through, it feels like, okay, we need to start moving him into something approaching human territory and human decency. And then what then happens is that a whole bunch of other stuff about the family that he's kind of left behind, which is sort of epitomised by this peculiar little plot thing which doesn't quite work, about his sister, his relative, is getting married, and he's got a cardboard cutout of her that he's taking around the country to take photographs of in interesting places. And it's a kind of cutesy idea that doesn't work at all. But as the film decides to develop a heart, that starts to play an increasingly prominent role. The other thing is that his relationship with this woman who he's met, who says, think of me as you, actually turns out to be not what he thought he is, but starts to be complicated by genuine human relationships. And the film slowly turns into a story of someone on a journey, on an emotional journey in which they learn that there is more to life than airport lounges. And then that's the point that I lose it. And it's funny how that is always going to be a regular problem with mainstream films. This is that they feel that they have to get a heart. And the point that I lose faith in them is the point at which they decide. It's like it starts out being one kind of film, and although it's not particularly earth-shatteringly new, it's well done, it's briskly executed, it has a certain brio and charm, and there are things in it that are funny because they're so sort of heartless, and that's, it has that kind of that smart, brisk charm which I like. And yet, when it suddenly decides that it needs to have a rounded personality, it needs to give itself more character, it needs to give itself some sense of kind of evident moral baggage, it loses its way. Compare that to The Terminal, the Spielberg movie, which is sentimental from the outset. And yet you kind of know where you are with it because it's Tom Hanks lost in an airport terminal. So, it's like the schmaltz factor is writ large. In the case of Up in the Air, when it was being heartless, when it was being cynical, when it was being, sneery and narky, I liked it. When it started to become human, I just thought, no.
Do you think it's possible to have a George Clooney movie in which he stays sneery and narky to the end?
No,
I don't like you.
No, I think that actually may not become. Funnily enough, Michael Clayton had a good job at being, more cynical than perhaps you. But of course, Michael Clayton ends up with There's a marvellous moment in Michael Clayton towards the end of not towards it, I'm not giving away the ending of it. There's a moment in Michael Clayton in which George Clooney says to one of the characters, I'm the guy you buy. I'm not the guy that you try to kill, I'm the guy that you buy. And the line has real impact because you go, I can't believe George Clooney is saying that. But I think the movie would have been much more adventurous if Up in the Air he had turned out to be simply, I'm the guy that flies.